everyone, and welcome to another Scots Whay Hae podcast. And today I'm joined by artist Pat Law to hear all about GAFFER, Impressions of a Loch Fyne Skiff, a multimedia exhibition created by the Law family, which is on at the Scottish Maritime Museum in Irvine, running until the 2nd of February next year. Hello, Pat.
Hello, Alistair.
So can you talk about, first of all, the inspiration behind GAFFER, the exhibition?
Oh, the inspiration, of which there is loads. We've had the boat for 25 years. We sailed the boat for 25 years, and Kirsty was the hub of many art projects, directly and indirectly. And we always said that we'd keep the boat until our 100th birthday. And that came along, and, you know, we still quite liked the boat, and so weren't quite really, so we kept it for another couple of years after that. But I thought, well, this is the last one. You know, we won't have Kirsty forever. So I wanted to do one more project. And I think that got me thinking a wee bit deeper than just the apparent romance and beauty and nostalgia and all that stuff that these boats have. And just looking at the value of the boat, the human value of the boat, the skills that went into the boat, how these boats have helped shape our cultural memory for a start. I mean, every day we use these words, these nautical terms. We don't even think about it, you know, like being on board with something or on an even keel or getting hitched. There's hundreds of them. We use them every day and we're not even aware that we see them. So I think our maritime heritage is deep inside us. I think boats have always been important to Scotland and of course to our island communities, and they've helped shape our cultural identity. So I started looking a wee bit deeper at all of these things and coming up with the questions, no answers, but what is the value of these boats and why do we want to preserve them? And sadly, we don't want to preserve them as much as some European countries do. You know, we like old buildings, not so much old boats. And France, for instance, doesn't really care about old buildings, but it likes its boats. Yeah. So, you know, if we could just raise awareness a wee bit to say, you know, that the skills that have gone into making these boats and sailing these boats, the lives that have passed through them, they're all worth taking note of and maybe keeping hold of a wee bit and valuing them and being aware of where we've come from because they've helped shape us. So that was the background.
I think it's fascinating that you're talking about vessels. 100 years old is quite a length of time. And, you know,
it is.
If a car lasts 8 years.
Exactly, yeah.
But also, as you say, the kind of the work that goes into not just making them, but also sailing them and maintaining them. You know, this is something that you can just park. You know, you really have to it's an ongoing thing. And were you interested in that before you bought Kirsty? We should say here, your daughter is also Kirsty, so let's not get confused.
No coincidence at all. The boat was named Kirsty in 1921. My daughter was named Kirsty in 1990. We didn't, we didn't even have the boat then, so it's sheer coincidence.
Yeah, but just in case listeners got confused when another Kirsty come up, because we will talk about the family involved in a bit. But were you interested in this before you bought Kirsty, or was that something that came with learning about the boat itself?
Well, no, before Kirsty, we've always had wooden boats. We had nothing else but wooden boats. They appealed to us. Our first one was a wee trailer sailor that when the girls were wee, and we would stick them up the front and off we'd go. And we had to obviously maintain that boat too, but we just liked the idea of working in wood. We liked the material and we liked the character of these boats. And then by the time we got to Kirsty, we'd had quite a few years experience in wooden boats behind us. So it wasn't as daunting as, maybe stupid, but not as daunting as it might have seemed.
And when people come along to the exhibition, you know, as I mentioned at the start, it's a multimedia exhibition. What can they expect and kind of experience when they're there?
Well, I hope that they would see a progression. There are old photos and documents and objects that have come from when the boat was built, but the work is brand new and there is everything in between. And I made a wee film. Maybe I should go back a wee bit. When we bought Kirsty, we inherited this sort of box of goodies, as I call it, and it was filled with documents and letters and all that sort of thing. And in it were 2 letters from a woman called Jean Hunter. and she was the last remaining member of the Fife family that built the boat. And she had been around when the boat was being built, and she made friends with the kids of the man who was having the boat built, and she went sailing with them.
Right.
Now, in the 80s, Peter and Fran Flutter, who also had the boat for 25 years, they sailed back to Bute to see the site that she was built on and to meet people, etc., etc. Now, Jean Hunter was in her 80s by then, and she lived just along the road from where Kirsty was tied up on this visit to Bute, and
Wow.
nobody told her.
Oh, wow.
So she didn't get to see the boat for the last time, and her letters are quite heartrending. You know, they're quite poignant, and she was heartbroken. So she found out who the Flutters were, how to get in touch with them, and she wrote to them and told them all of this. So it really struck a chord, and I had to use these somehow because she was the bit in between the old and the new. And because they were so poignant, I felt I had to use them to bridge that gap. So it's just a wee 6-minute film.
Yeah, I watched it this morning, actually. I thought I watched
right.
spoke. And it's got, so there's some black and white photography there. And is that things that were found as well?
Well, the black and white photography, all the old photos,
Yes.
some of them were in this box of goodies, but some of them were sent to us. As soon as we started doing a wee bit of research into Kirsty, for every door we knocked on, another half dozen opened. Yeah. And out of them came flooding a million stories and photos and references and documents. We were inundated, and we were really taken aback by the enthusiasm and the interest that is still there for the boat. So they do strike a chord, you know, for whatever reason or reasons, people are still enthusiastic about them.
Yeah, I have to say I've experienced that myself. I've worked on a boat called the Vic 32, which is an old buffer which goes down kind of,
lovely.
It takes passengers. It's, you know, it's been converted into that. And the love for these boats, but also the upkeep that they take and the, you know, the constant. And I think when I was reading your own thoughts on the exhibition, I mean, you talk about the kind of skills that go in to not just creating these beautiful hulls and hatches and things, but like portals and the boilers, if it's a boiler themselves or whatever it might be. And some of these, I guess, are almost lost skills.
They could be. I like to think that they're asleep.
Yes,
because there are still pockets, you know, that of people that are still doing it. But if they're asleep, they can be wakened up. And maybe we can revitalize it all and have a look at the value of learning these skills, not to keep them in aspic back in the 19th century, but they are transferable skills and they can be kept alive by applying them to 21st century projects. And the value in learning that, I think there are many reasons. Well, they connect people with people for a start. When people are working on boats, you have these boat building courses. They're connecting folk together, and they're connecting them to the past as well as to the present. But they're also connecting us to the environment because they're working with these raw materials that they've probably never worked with before.
Yeah.
And then this vessel is like magic. They take it onto the water and it floats and it sails, you know, and they're on another dimension once again. So I think there are many reasons for keeping these skills alive. And I don't think they're dead, but I think they're a wee bit asleep and we could help waking them up a bit.
No, I mean, I think you're right. They are there, but people often, they have to find, it's not easy to just turn up and say, well, you're someone that can do this aspect of a boat.
Yeah.
You really have to find it and go and find it.
Yeah.
And the idea of the wooden, I've seen it myself, the reaction people have. I remember one weekend being at a Crinan Classics Boat Festival, which was basically all wooden boats.
Yes.
And people have this fundamental attraction to them. You know, they want to touch them. They want to, you know, if they can be on board, sometimes they want to take pictures of them. But, you know, and I wonder if that is linked to something from a past or at least a present that people aren't aware exists.
I think they're romantic and they're nostalgic, but if we could take that romance and nostalgia, which is skin deep really, isn't it? It's something you just go ooh and ah and walk away. But if we could maybe connect that to the thing that has more substance and meaning, bring them together somehow, maybe by introducing more boat building courses or any other kind of gathering that educates people about wooden boats, then maybe they could join the two up and it'd be a wee bit more long lasting, you know?
Yeah, because the few boat yards I've visited, they all have people that still have the skills that you're talking about.
Yeah. yeah, and definitely worth preserving, I think.
And as we said, this is a collaboration between members of your family. Maybe it'd be nice if you could introduce them and what their roles in the project are.
Yeah. Well, Kirsty, you already know, I think, because you've spoken to her before. She's a musician, she's a songwriter, singer, getting into performance a bit now. And she also has a production company called Hellmart. So she's got her fingers in different pies, collaborates with different people on different projects. And having been almost brought up on the boat, you know, there was no one better than my two daughters, who are artists in their own right, to take part in this project, because they know the boat better than anybody outside the family. So I always like to have different elements within. I like mixed media in the projects that I do, because my work is usually project based. So Kirsty was there with exactly what I needed. So I wanted her to join in. And then Mhairi, she is a photographer, an award-winning photographer, I have to say. She lives up on Lewis now and has her own darkroom there, and works with medium format cameras. And so they have a beautiful quality. The black and white, it has a lovely quality that I don't think digital can quite match. And she's, you know, again, she's been on the boat most of her life and has taken photos and knows the boat intimately. So they were just the perfect people to join me on this. And I was delighted that they wanted to. And it was great working together in that way.
And
of course, Andy, I can't forget him.
Absolutely.
I can't forget him. He took every idea I had and tried it out for me. Because I'd think, oh, could this work? And could that work? Could we just try this? And it all involved bits of wood and hammering things together, or trying this out and putting this together. And I couldn't have done it without him. So, and also installing the show, there was lots of bits that had to be fixed and stuck together somehow. And he did it all. So it was really a team effort with every member of the family.
And it's really interesting because I know Kirsty's music, it's often a folk and traditional, and going back to traditional ways of storytelling and these things.
Yes.
And from what you're saying about Mhairi is her interest in photography is an older way of doing it and not using necessarily digital and all that.
Yeah.
So clearly in the family, there's an idea that the skills from the past can still be used today.
Absolutely. Yeah, but brought into the 21st century, and not just using them as they were 200 years ago, but bringing them up to date, so that the original medium still has a voice and these old stories still have a voice, but they're just brought up to date a bit. They're made valid now.
And do you think it's not just the history of this boat, but maritime history more widely is really important for the reasons perhaps we've mentioned, is that it's it's a part of Scotland's history that's maybe still kind of overlooked or almost forgotten.
Yeah, maybe because it is so deep inside us that we're not even, I mean, it's in there, but it's not at the front of our brains.
Yeah.
So maybe it's taken for granted a bit. And so we just forget about the value of them and let them go to sleep, as I like to say. But there's no doubt it's in us. It's in the very fabric of our society. We've always been a maritime nation. And it would be an awful shame to forget about that.
Yeah, and I know that the Transport Museum in Glasgow, the what's going on the Clyde, and you know, and even something like the restoration of the Queen Mary, people are really interested in it.
They are, yeah.
And there's a real enthusiasm as well, which people sometimes don't even realise they have until they start to learn about it.
Absolutely. And the Maritime Museum in Irvine, where the show is on just now, is doing the same thing. It's a great museum. I think it's my favourite museum. I love it. And they are doing their best to keep all that up to date and to get people through the doors. And we were delighted that that was the first launch. Here we go. You know, it's in our everyday language. It was the first launch of the project was in the Maritime Museum, and they were great. They were very supportive, every one of them. So really grateful to them for letting us start it off there.
And when you start a project like this, do you start to make connections that you maybe hadn't previously, like you mentioned in language, and you said launch there, and do you say, oh yeah, there's that? Is that something that happens?
It does. Any project that I start off with, there's an idea, but I try not to have too many preconceived ideas. I'd rather be open to what's there, because if you're too fixed in a way of doing something, you're going to miss stuff. You know, you need to keep your eyes open all around and just be open to what you find, and then change it as it goes along if need be. And that's what I did with Gaffer. But yeah, I mean, everything we discovered, all the research, my goodness, there was so much of it. I would have been silly to say, no, it's going to be this and nothing else. I wanted to stay open to what Kirsty and Mhairi came up with, but also to the way the ideas developed and moved around a bit.
I think it's people that will go to the exhibition, or people that listen to music, or whatever, who just, I don't want to say consume, that's the wrong word, but who kind of interact, who don't make the art themselves, don't realize that actually for artists often the process is where the kind of real magic happens and where you discover these things, isn't it?
Absolutely. I like to use the raw materials from whatever place it is that I'm working with. I think these materials have their own stories to tell. And I quite like to listen to that instead of me dictating to that to them. I quite like the materials dictating to me what they want to say, and take that on board. So I work a lot with raw materials, with whether it's lava, salt, peat, different soil, sand. I like to bring it all back to the studio wherever it is I'm working, and then work with it there.
And you mentioned the letters of Jean Hunter.
Mm-hmm.
Were there other people important in the boat that did you research? Is that how it worked? Did you go back?
We did. We went to Butte. We went to the old site where Kirsty was launched. It's not a boat building yard anymore. There is one next door, but that wasn't the original Fife boat yard at Ardmalish. And you could still see the old rubble the slip was made of. They're not made like that anymore. And just looking out to the shore where she was launched, my goodness, it's exposed and rocky, and you wouldn't want to be stranded on that shore. But the people were few and far between, and sadly Jean Hunter wasn't there anymore.
Yeah.
I'd really like to show the project at Rothsay Pavilion, which is still being refurbished, and I think is due to open maybe 2026, something like that. I don't know if they'd be interested in it, but I think it would be a perfect place to show Gaffer. So I might just approach them at some point when they're ready to receive it, and hope that we can maybe show Gaffer there.
Well, I mean, it sounds like the kind of exhibition, as long as it's not too difficult to do, that would be great to tour, if you like, and take other places, because particularly the places which are near the sea and where the communities, because that's the thing, these boats were big parts of the community, weren't they?
Absolutely. The show's going to Antober on Mull this summer. Brilliant. Which is good. But if there are any other arts venues out there that would like to have us, then please get in touch.
And when you discovered your box of goodies, as you said, was there anything kind of unexpected in there? Was there anything that you thought, that you really had to question, why is that there?
Why is that? No, there were no surprises as such. There were some beautiful things to look at, like the original registration document, which is handwritten in beautiful handwriting. I mean, none of us can write now, can we? We're all too busy on the keyboard.
Tell me about it. I'm looking at my notes here.
Exactly. Other letters from other people who used to own the boat, not quite as interesting probably as Jean Hunter's. That was the one that caught my imagination. But yeah, just lots of bits of paper and not objects, sadly. But so saying that, Peter Flutter, who owned the boat for 25 years, very sadly died last year. And before he did, he knew that he didn't have long, and he sent us a half model of Kirsty and the old spreader and this old beam, because in the 70s they had an accident. Kirsty had a tiny engine at that point, and they were in Cowes, I think it was, and a storm was coming in, and the harbour master asked them to move, and they said, well, we can't move against the wind, our engine isn't strong enough. But he insisted, so they tried but failed. And as they were trying to push off the pier, Fran Flutter's legs got caught between the two and they were crushed. And they said that she would never walk again, which she did. She went on to sail single-handed to New Zealand and won the Rose Medal, which was incredible. But God. During that, they bought the boat back for the price of the keel because the insurance company wrote it off. And then they salvaged this piece of beam, which was the original bit of beam. So I've used that as part of one of the artworks in the Gaffer show. So that was lovely to have that. So that didn't arrive with the boat, but we got that just a year or two ago. Things are still coming in. It's very nice.
That's an incredible story.
Isn't it?
Yes, yeah. And so have you had to learn skills yourself in the upkeep of the boat? You mentioned that you've had boats before in the past. You know, have you been doing your own upkeep on Kirsty?
Absolutely, yeah. We have both been hands-on with every boat we've had, including Kirsty. So I suppose we've been learning as we go along. And there's some things that are way beyond us, and we would rather they were done right because she's such a special boat. We didn't want to make an arse of it, a hash of it ourselves. So no, we've been learning constantly, I think.
Because I think it's interesting, because it's not a commercial boat, I guess it can be the way that it was originally. There's no pressure to have, you know, health and safety things that might be on something that is a commercial undertaking.
Well, the boat did change a wee bit throughout the years. And was it in the 60s or the 50s? Believe it or not, there was a bath.
Ah, yes.
This tiny wee bath in part of what is now the galley. There was a bath. I mean, incredible. The water tanks aren't even that big. I mean, I have no idea what they were thinking about, but there was a bath. And where there is a workbench now, where we would keep all the tools, used to be another bunk for the crew, because they would take people, but I mean, it's only a 37-foot boat, for goodness sake, but they would separate the lounge, the saloon part, and the forecastle from the back bit where the galley was and where the crew slept. So there was this sort of, it's not even a quarter berth, it was more of a shelf, I think, for sleeping on. So it has changed slightly throughout the years. I think each owner has done something a wee bit different to it, but that's fine. You know, they evolve like everything does evolve. And she's still a beautiful boat.
That's the part of the history, isn't it? The kind of evolution,
absolutely,
the things which are added, and then perhaps the things which are taken away. I mean, in my experience, I don't think space is used so intelligently as it is on a boat. You know, everything is kind of thought out and thought, and nothing is put to waste, is what my experience of it. Certainly on a boat like the one you're talking about.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes if you go to a modern flat, maybe in a ski place or a holiday place, and they're tiny, oh my goodness, what a waste of space. You know, and they could learn a lot through looking at boats.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
How to make the use of the space that they've got.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that kind of leads me on to my next question, which is, we've touched on it a little bit, but you think there are lessons that we could learn today from maritime history and the history not just of boat making, but of boat owning too?
Boat owning too. Well, you learn a lot of skills along the way. There's no doubt about that. But there's so much to learn from a boat, I suppose, because of the different lives that have passed through it. I mean, there's the social history.
Yeah.
There are the woodworking skills. You know, there's the collective memory, which I find really interesting, because that's a wee bit subjective, and we choose to remember maybe the bits that we want to remember, so they become romantic and nostalgic. But I think they're still worth remembering, and if for no other reason, there's a wealth of stories there. Storytellers have a heyday with old boats, you know, because it's left to your imagination, and they're just rich pickings. You know?
Yeah, I think boats really do lend themselves to not just the telling of stories, but learning. Again, these are things which move around in almost confined space. So you're bumping into similar people, and you're getting off at the same points because there's only certain places you can move up. So it's, although people have this idea of the wide open sea, which is right, and someone sailing to New Zealand, it just blows my mind, you know. But in Scotland, it's often canals and lochs, and maybe slightly out to sea, but not too far, depending on what the boat can take. So you do end up, there is a community, isn't there, of seafarers that not
absolutely
boat owners.
Yeah, we don't go inland and we don't go into canals. In fact, we don't even go into marinas. We like just getting out into the middle of nowhere. But so saying that, we meet loads of great people through the boat. We've met loads of interesting folk, discovered what voyages and adventures they're on or are having or plan to do. And so it is a very social thing. You think you're out there and there's nobody there, but it's not true. You meet lots of great folk.
And I think it goes back to that idea that people are almost instinctively attracted to these vessels, without a doubt. And when I was talking about the skills that people might learn today, I was thinking When I was younger, one of my neighbours ran a shop where people took their old kettles to get fixed. They took their old irons to get fixed. You know, that's what the shop was. That was his business. And of course, that just wouldn't happen today on the whole. But with things like boats where you have to mend them. You can't just say, or you don't want to just say, well, that's now, you know, had its time, let's go and get another one. It's, you know, that the history speaks to a love affair and a kind of maintenance that's more than just practical. It's emotional as well.
I think if the boat's built well, then the maintenance is all right. You know, it's not, people often stop and say, oh my God, you've got your work cut out there. And, you know, it's not that bad. I mean, at least if there's something wrong with a piece of wood, you can cut it out and stick another bit in. Yeah, they are salvageable. And the work on a boat is pleasurable. You know, you're working with nice materials. There are times where we've had to chop a bit out of Kirsty from the original hull, and you can still smell it. It's pitch pine on oak.
Yeah.
And still you can smell the resins in that piece of wood, you know, which is lovely. Therein is a story in itself, you know. So,
and it makes me think of a boat like that's been, you know, fixed and mended over 100 years. Is it still the same boat that started when it first came out the boatyard? That's the philosophical question for the day.
Grandfather's axe, you mean?
Yes, that's right. That's exactly it.
I think they are on the whole, unless it's a complete rebuild.
No, there's a personality I've found to most boats that kind of, you know, right through without a doubt. And you said now you wanted to keep till Kirsty was 100. You kept her till she was 102. Is she now no longer with you?
She's now no longer with us. Someone else bought her. Well, he thinks because he paid money for the boat he owns it, he doesn't. She's still ours, you see. She still feels ours. We will always have an interest in Kirsty. But sadly, he's put her up for sale again, which is heartbreaking. And I really hope that somebody buys her because, my goodness, she's a very special boat worth saving. So if anybody wants to buy a beautiful Loch Fyne skiff, I believe that she's in Wales now, then she is for sale. So please get in touch because she's a gem.
There you go. What an opportunity to kind of own
absolutely
maritime history.
Yeah.
We should let people know where they can learn more about GAFFER and the Scottish maritime history as well.
Yep. Well, when I have a web page, it's my website, it's my new website, so it only has one thing on it, and that's GAFFER. But the web address is patlaw.scot, and there is a web page about GAFFER on that they can have a look at.
And if people want to visit, you say it's in Irvine.
It's in Irvine, yeah, up until the beginning of February. So it's a 3-month run, which is great, and open every day until then, so they can visit there.
And look out for it when it hits its Scottish tour as well, by the sounds
of it. Antober and Mull next summer, yeah.
Fantastic. Pat, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you. I'm going to get along to it myself because it sounds a fascinating project.
Good.
Yeah. And all the very best with GAFFER and the future.
Thank you.
We'll be back soon with someone completely different.